Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Absolutely destroying Lipscomb. Final score in that game, 97-68. Of course, why that's noteworthy, Kentucky, it's the first game back from Duke. It's also worth noting, and I promise I'm not trying to make this a Kentucky versus its former head coach segment, but Lipscomb played at Bud Walton Arena to open the season. Yeah, it did not look like that when they played Arkansas, so one team clearly has more work to do. But Kentucky gets the victory 97-68. By the way, a couple interesting things came out of this. First of all, I saw this stat. First time that Kentucky has made 10 threes or more in their first 4 games of a season ever. Mark Pope was mad about that. He said, what about my 96 team? Are you sure that's right? All that good stuff. Jackson Robinson, as you can see on the screen, I think this is important, is that Jackson Robinson got going. Remember, he was the player that was projected to be the quote-unquote best player on this team. Well, Jackson Robinson finishes with 20 points. He played much better. And overall, just think it was a solid evening for Kentucky. It's not a game that's going to define their season. It's not a game that we're going to be talking about if Kentucky goes on a Final Four run or a national title run, but it's the way you want to look against the team that you should beat in the manner that they beat Lipscomb. By the way, I think it's also worth noting, I find it funny, all these media people now coming, oh, is Kentucky a title contender? Is Kentucky going to win the SEC? It's like, Torres been telling you since Jackson Robinson finalized the roster in June or late May or whatever it was. It's like, this team's really good. I never understood the argument that they were anything other than a top 15 team. Now, I didn't have them top 5. I didn't have them top 3. I don't have them winning the national championship. But this idea that all these media outlets are like, well, you know who's really surprising people is Kentucky. It's like, really? The team that has 4 guys who averaged double figures last year, the best defensive guard in the portal, Lamont Butler, the best defensive big in the portal, Mari Williams, Kobe Brea, the best statistical three-point shooter. So, yeah, not very surprised that this team is good. But what I will say, and I think this is important, there was one thing that Mark Pope did say in his post-game press conference that I think has to have Kentucky fans excited, okay? And that is because, listen, good win, solid win. As I said, Jackson Robinson got going. But you know who else had a very good game? That would be friend of the Aaron Torres pod, buddy of mine. I love the kid. I've told you a million times. I've known him since he was probably 13, 14 years old. That was Lamont Butler. 16 points in that game. And oh, by the way, how about this from behind the three-point line for Lamont Butler? Lamont Butler finished that game 3 of 3 behind the three-point line, 6 of 8 from the field, 16 points in that game. So why do I bring it up? Well, it's because after the game, Mark Pope was asked about Lamont Butler, and he gave a very interesting answer that I think is worth noting. This is what Mark Pope said, direct quote from his post-game press conference. We don't have the video. Unfortunately, producer Matt had a busy morning. I had him pulling a bunch of other stuff, so I'll just read this quote. Mark Pope said on Lamont Butler, he said, he is an elite-level shooter. Listen, and please don't get me in trouble for what I'm saying, because San Diego State coach Brian Dutcher is one of the greatest coaches in all of college basketball, and Lamont's run at San Diego State was brilliant. I mean, he couldn't have been any better. They couldn't have been any better. I mean, they went to a national championship game, but this is where it gets interesting. And I want to give the whole quote so it doesn't sound like he's throwing San Diego State on the bus. He said, but Lamont is going to be a way better shooter in our system because we shoot. That's what we do. It's a different style. Our emphases are different. It doesn't mean they're better or worse. It's just different. Lamont is an elite level shooter. So why do I bring this up? 1, it's the middle of the week. There's not much going on in college hoops. But 2, I hate to say it, but Torres told you so on this one. And I know I get exhausting. Oh, Torres said this, Torres said that. But go back to the day that Lamont Butler committed to this team, because I remember the day. Because I had all you saying, oh, he's a defensive guard. He's going to be the 6th man. He's not even going to play. I said, no. I said 2 things. You go back and watch. It was, I think, first weekend in May, something like that, late April or in May. I said 2 things. I said, he's your starting point guard. I know Kirk Kriisa committed a few weeks later. All the other national analysts, oh, Kirk Kriisa is the starting point guard, and we'll see what Lamont Butler does. No. Torres told you. He's day 1 starter. Mark Pope, the second Lamont Butler went into the portal, Mark Pope got on a plane the next day and flew across country with his entire staff. If that doesn't tell you the priority that Lamont Butler was for this coaching staff and this program, I'm sorry, nothing will. But beyond that, and this is where it gets important, the other part that is worth noting, I told you, I said he's not just a defensive guy. Believe me when I tell you, this guy can get buckets too. It's just what he wasn't asked. It's just not what he was asked to do at San Diego State. And I know I'm going to go a little abstract here, but I said this a year ago with a kid by the name of Keyshawn Johnson, okay? Keyshawn Johnson played at San Diego State for 4 years, came in, I think, a year before Lamont at San Diego State, but he hits the portal, and I'm looking at all these portal lists, and he's like not even on them. And I'm like, that kid's really good. And he commits to Arizona, and I went on all the Arizona podcasts. I just mentioned my buddy Mike Luke. I was on his podcast today, actually. We were talking about Keyshawn Johnson. We were talking about this quote from Mark Pope about how guys are different once they get out of that San Diego State offense. And it doesn't mean that Brian Dutcher isn't a great coach. This isn't a tear down San Diego. It's San Diego State, excuse me. It's exactly what Mark Pope said. The two systems are different. The two coaching styles are different. It's not that San Diego State isn't a great program, but it is that whether it was Keyshawn Johnson last year at Arizona, whether it was Lamont Butler this year at Kentucky, the truth of the matter is they were, just because they were never asked to do something doesn't mean they're not capable of it. You know, it's almost like an option quarterback in football. It's like, just because they're not asked to throw the ball 30 times a game doesn't mean that if you give them the opportunity, they're incapable of doing it. And it was always the same with Lamont Butler. This is a kid that he can get you 17, 18 on a night. He just never had to do it at San Diego State because that's not what was asked. And here's the crazy part. I don't think that's what's going to be asked of him at Kentucky either. But what I do think is, if he can get you 16, which he can, which we've been telling you since May that he can, here's the great part. That is a nice ancillary offensive piece to have in your back pocket, because we all know that the bread is going to be buttered. By the way, I've used that term like 10 times in the last day. I don't know where that came from, but your bread is going to be buttered with Jackson Robinson, who got going in this game against Lipscomb. Of course, he struggled against Duke, but looked much better. You have Kobe Brea, who statistically is, again, already one of the, if not the best, three-point shooters in all of college basketball. You have Kobe Brea. You have Jackson Robinson. You have Amari Williams. You don't need Lamont to be great on every single night. But the fact that he is, it could take this team to another level. And so this isn't going to be the day where I talk about, can Kentucky win a national championship? Can Kentucky go to the Final Four? Can Kentucky do this? Can Kentucky do that? But what I think we're seeing, and this is important, Mark Pope had a plan when he went into the portal. Everything was intentional. Everything was on purpose. Every piece had to fit with every other piece, but every piece had to fit with the bigger picture of how Mark Pope wanted to play as a head coach. And so, yes, Lamont Butler was the point guard that he didn't average 22 a game at San Diego State, but it didn't mean that he was pigeonholed or that he wasn't capable of being really good offensively. So if I'm a Kentucky fan, man, I am excited because this team, every time they take the floor, they look more confident. They look better. A new guy emerges. How about, Duke? Jackson Robinson doesn't play well, but Andrew Carr steps up. Tuesday night, it was Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler. So many options, so many pieces. You got to be excited if you're a Kentucky fan. I am. So, yeah, I'm excited.